Greetings fellow pagan pals, Bellarosa here, and today we're making Joss sticks. This form of incense typically doesn't have a bamboo core. I'm first assembling a drying board for my incense. I found this board at Walmart. It's stained, but if you can find one that isn't stained, that will help your incense to dry better. My board measures about 14 inches across, and I'm going to cut my bamboo skewers down to about 5 inches and glue them down to the board. Be sure to use the straight sticks only. I lined up my skewers and marked where to make the cut on one stick. Then I lined them up with the others and roughly followed that mark down onto the rest of my sticks. Now you can use a box cutter to make your cut, but I found that it was just easier to use scissors and score the sticks and then make the rest of the break myself. Once you have your evenly cut sticks, it's time to glue them down. I used hot glue as my adhesive, and then to make sure they were evenly spaced, I placed an unglued skewer right next to the glued one before gluing down my next stick. Once it was attached, I went back in and popped it out. Now I have 2 columns on my drying rack, a gap between for making cuts, and long rows to lay out my incense. I used a clay extruder that I purchased online, but I've also seen them in Michael's craft store. This will house our incense dough and create the thin sticks we're aiming for. Though they come in a variety of inserts to make different shapes, I'm going to use a round one that fits over a condiment tip. The plastic tip will help the incense to come out smoothly. Without it, the metal insert could damage the appearance of our incense. The insert should fit snug on the tip, and just on the other side is where I make my cut. Assembly is pretty straightforward. The tip goes into the insert goes into the head cap, then screw on the cylinder, and keeping everything upright, place in the plunger, and now we're ready to prepare our incense dough. For these incense, I'm using Frankincense and Myrrh resin with Makko Powder. When using resins in combustible incense, your burning element has to be high or the resin just won't burn. As long as you're putting at least double or more of your combustible element, the incense should burn on its own. In total, I ended up using about 2.5 teaspoons of Makko Powder, 3/4 teaspoon of Myrrh, and 1/4 teaspoon of frankincense. Make sure to add your water a little bit at a time. The powder won't absorb the water right away, so just keep stirring until you get a dough shape. Now, initially, I put in too much water, and that made my incense quite uncooperative. If this happens to you, put in a little more Makko powder to err on the safer side, and that should give you a drier and stiffer dough. Now, after I did that, the dough was a lot stronger, and that made it easier for me to form the straight lines that I was looking for. The technique requires a learning curve. Don't go too slowly, let the dough drop, and try not to move faster than it comes out, or you're going to drag the dough with you. Take your time, and remember, you can always reload any pieces that didn't come out right. I took a shot and decided, well, why not make some spirals? Allow the long string of dough to fall first and then just go around and make a loop. I also decided to try and use some cardboard as a drying rack and see how that worked. I used a toothpick to straighten out any defects. A little of this dough goes a long way, so be prepared to roll out some cones if you'd like. Halfway through the drying phase, the incense need to be turned very carefully because they are still fragile at this point. On the drying rack, this was relatively easy enough, but they ended up drying onto the cardboard, so if you use this strategy, just press down on either side of your incense gently, and that should get the incense to pull away from the cardboard. The next day, I saw that my incense were fully dried and a lot firmer. Just look at all this awesome loot. Some incense broke, but that's okay. I'm still so proud. They're great to use for ritual or even as gifts. Subscribe now, become a Pagan Pal, like up this video, and I'll see you next time for another episode of my Pagan Pal Crafts and Such. Bye!